Have you ever just wanted to turn your brain off while you control an amnesiac with no real discernible personality other than a fire fit and an unwavering desire to slay everything in his path until there's absolutely nobody left? No? Just me? Okay, well, have you ever wanted to just play a fun action game? Well, boy oh boy are you in luck, because recently Dynasty Warriors Origins just came out, and oh my goodness, this game is incredible. This game really asks the question, how much can one player actually go through and destroy hundreds upon thousands of people before they begin to feel even the slightest bit of remorse? And the answer to that is there is no end, there is no limit, it is just death. So let's just take a second to talk about it, the good, the bad, and everything you need to know before you're considering making a purchase for this game. And so without further ado, let's get into it. For the uninitiated, Dynasty Warriors is a franchise that has been going for a long time. It initially came out in '97 as a fighting game of all things, which is kind of weird, but the game that we all know is the classic hack and slash that tells the story of the three kingdoms, in which you see the rise and fall of these different nations as you attempt to see who is fit to rule over China. It is a story that has been repeated literally every single game. It does not deviate off of that story. It is quite honestly the same thing almost the entire way through, with slight deviations here and there, which quite honestly was always fine for me because I never really cared all that much about the story. I thought it was cool, but the real reason why I always wanted to play it and why I loved it was just the incredible gameplay that this game has. Dynasty Warrior Origins is what we like to call a Muso game, which is typically just a game where one person fights endless amounts of enemies seemingly. You're literally just dropped into a fight, you have your army and their army, and they basically just say, go cause chaos. If you ever wanted to feel the greatest power fantasy ever, you're gonna want to play one of these games because you feel so powerful every single time you go into one of these games. And in Dynasty Warrior Origins, it's very similar, except this time they're still telling the story of the three kingdoms, but it's through the perspective of a brand new protagonist. The protagonist, whose name I'm not going to pronounce for fear out of butchering the language, is our good old amnesiac who just stumbles into this place not knowing where he's from or where he belongs, but just trying to do some good in the world, who also somehow has the capacity to take on legions upon legions of enemies, except he looks like he's actually like 19 years old. Like, this dude is actually the ideal candidate at 18 years old with 6 years of experience. But he's who we see the entire story through, which is perhaps probably the biggest deviation of this game in comparison to literally any other Dynasty Warriors games if you're somebody who's played any of the prior ones. In every other Dynasty Warriors game, as you selected a different campaign for each nation, you would have an assortment of characters that you would cycle through as the story would progress. You'd play as one character in one mission and another character in another mission. But in this game, you are predominantly only playing as a protagonist, while also sometimes having an ally that will come alongside you that you can occasionally swap in as you're playing. This does a couple things, but let's start with the story of the game first. As I said before, this game tells the story of the romance of the three kingdoms, and it's a story that has been told time and time and time again with every single Dynasty Warriors game. It's sort of like the defining trait of these games is that it tells a story. And while that's still very much told here, there is also now the story of our protagonist, who has now inserted himself into the story, where before this person was never to be seen. And so with that, there are essentially two different stories going on at the same time. The story of the romance of the three kingdoms and the story of our protagonist and everything around him. Sometimes these elements blend in together very nicely, and sometimes they don't necessarily blend together very nicely. Again, it's a story that has been told so many times that we know what to expect. And so now when there's this added person that comes in that has major relevance to the story, they have to find places to bring him in order to give him actual relevance as to why he's there. Very minor spoilers for the overall story of Dynasty Warriors if you've never heard it before. But the inciting incident in every single Dynasty Warriors game is the Yellow Turban Rebellion. And in this game, that still happens. However, your character becomes the fulfillment of a prophecy that would take down the leader of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, and that is what gives him relevance into the story. In every other game, he's just some mad dude who you end up wiping out with no real regard for who he is. But that idea is prevalent as the story goes on as well. The idea of inserting this character and giving him some relevance where there previously wasn't in order to actually make him make sense in this storyline. I'm not going to say that that's inherently a bad thing, but if you're somebody who's played the entirety of the Dynasty Warriors series and now you're coming into this one, it will seem a little jarring how often he becomes relevant to the story when before there were very sound reasons as to why everything was happening. But me personally, I don't mind it. I actually kind of like him because if for no other reason, the gameplay with the protagonist is absolutely incredible, which now let's talk about that. Stylistically, this game is incredibly similar to its predecessors. The formula for every single Dynasty Warriors game is you're dropped into this world with a series of objectives that you have to accomplish. It can be taking out this captain or taking over this battalion and stopping this assault from happening. And as you do so, you turn the tides of battle in your favor, increasing your team's morale and giving you the advantage over the fight. And there are times where your conditions to win the fight may not necessarily be just killing somebody, but it may be taking out an outpost or taking out the source of some sorcery. But regardless, you're dropped into this level, you have missions that you have to accomplish, and you have to make sure that as you're doing so, you're paying attention to everything that's happening on the map. Because while you're handling an objective, one of your teammates could start calling out for help, and if you don't go and assist them, they die, and that could end up losing you the game. So you're constantly having to traverse the battlefield in order to not only make sure that your objectives are getting complete, but that your allies' objectives are being completed as well, and that they're not running themselves into danger that could kill them. And so while it very much so is a power fantasy for you, the player, because you're just able to steamroll through thousands of people, you also have to remember that your allies can easily die at a moment's notice if you're not careful. I cannot tell you how many times playing this game I have lost a fight because I've been on 2,000 kills or something, and then at the same time I saw that all of my allies were getting massacred behind the scene. But that's just how the gameplay of Dynasty Warriors works in general. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and they have not tried to fix that in any sense here. As the story is told through the perspective of the protagonist, we get the opportunity to grow the character in the way that we want them to. There are numerous skill upgrades that you can get in this game as you progress that allow you to upgrade how you play the game. And on top of that, your character is able to wield a wide assortment of weapons, from swords to spears to dual axes and many more different types of weapons. Which is really cool because in previous games you were restricted to the weapon that your character used and maybe one other secondary weapon that they could use. But here you have access to so much. And so what it ends up becoming is this opportunity for you to experiment and try different things, see what you like, and as the fight is going and you're progressing, you can swap on the fly. You don't have to wait until you're out of instance to be able to swap your weapons. You can just say, I'm done with the sword for now, I'm gonna go to the spear, and that is really cool. Because what the gameplay becomes at this point, this large-scale hack and slash game where you're going through, mowing down tons of enemies, and the moment that your brain gets tired of the certain weapon that you're using, you have the option to change up how you're playing in order to keep the gameplay refreshing. And once you're starting to like a certain weapon, you can start leveling that weapon up in order to get more skills to further your ability with that weapon. The freedom of choice is incredible, and I love it. But that choice in gameplay also comes at a price, where focusing on the single protagonist does mean that we don't have the opportunity to explore our large cast of characters that we normally would in any other previous entry. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't play as them. This game has an ally system where when you're going into battle, you have the option to choose who is going to fight alongside you. The game will ask, who do you want to take? You can pick that character, and that person is your ally as you go throughout the next mission. And periodically, as you go throughout the mission, you're able to take control of them and utilize their entire skill set. However, it is for a temporary amount of time before you end up swapping back to the main protagonist. And while I don't mind having the protagonist as my main character and having other characters as allies, I did often find myself wishing that I had the opportunity to play as the characters that I've come to know and love through previous installments. Knowing that they're involved in certain missions, knowing that I've played them in certain missions, but that's from somebody who's played a previous game. With all of that though, that doesn't mean that the gameplay is bad. It's just that there was more that I wanted that we had in previous games. The gameplay is incredible. Again, the options to use whatever you want to upgrade your character how you want and to swap how you're playing on the fly in order to suit whatever you're feeling at the time is an incredible recipe for success. However, there are things that I do wish that the game had that previous entries do have that I think if they just added it, it would be really cool. For example, this game has a story mode, and a fairly good one at that. There's an overworld that your character can progress through with different scale battles that you can participate in that aren't necessarily tied to the story, but you can use to experiment, level up, and just have fun. Previous games also had free mode, where you can try out a number of fights with a large, if not all of the roster. Or a conquest mode, where there were different types of themed events or what-if stories sprinkled throughout to just make things different. It is kind of crazy that this game only has a story mode, and I do think that could be something easily fixed with an update that adds different things to the game. Who knows? But as of right now, we don't have that. And so overall, what do I think? The game is a really good reboot for the franchise. It does what it does incredibly well. And I won't say that in the things that it attempts to do, that it does anything really poorly. I think the biggest critique that I would have of this game is that I wish that there was just more, especially for a game that's worth $70. And as an installment in a franchise that has other cool features that would be really welcomed in this game. But again, that's just wishing for more and not accepting the game as it is right now. And as it is right now, I enjoy it. However, that being said, I would probably wait for this game to go on sale just a little bit before making a purchase. Especially if this is your first entry into the franchise and you have no real stake in it, give yourself some time. It's a great game, but I just wouldn't pay $70 for it again. But let me know what you think. Are you interested in getting this game? Have you picked it up already? And if so, what's your experience been with it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and leave a subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Alrighty guys, thanks so much for watching. Catch you in the next video. See ya!